All right, welcome in, folks. Thanks for coming out today. Hope you're able to grab some lunch. I'll be talking, but you can have some food nearby while we're going through this. We'll give another minute or so for folks to join. While we do, in chat, which is how we'll also be doing Q&A today, feel free to drop in. What is your favorite technology? This could be a tool or a toy or perhaps both. And in chat, if you'd like, you can send it to everybody. You're also free to send things to just the host and panelists, where just I will be able to see them. Yeah, GPS is a huge one. Chris, what's that? And perhaps share why you like it as well. For those who've just joined, we're talking about what is your favorite tech? What is your favorite piece of technology? Could be a tool, could be a toy. Not any particular bounds other than you consider it technology. Chris is sharing a microcontroller. Oh, virtual reality. Andrew, anything particular about IntelliJ that is among your favorite features or suite of features? I love the refactoring that they've built in.
Yeah, the automated refactoring is definitely my favorite part too.
Speaking of the GPS, I worked on an app idea years ago, just myself, for when you want to find a place like a restaurant or a gas station, but you want it along the route you're already traveling. You don't care if it's further along, you just don't want to go way off to the side to find it. And now, of course, that's just built into Google Maps and other map technologies. I should have figured this would be a good long list. I love this. All right, feel free to keep those coming in chat while we go, but I'm going to get us started today. Let's talk about tech, but we're not going to talk just about tech. We're going to mix in both business and technology here. And we're going to start in an interesting way. So what I'd like you to do, and this is a requirement for this talk even, is put away your phone, put away all of the screens. If you've got multiple screens, get something off of them, or just turn yourself around. You won't need my screen. I'm going to put this slide up on it that's going to stay up on it for the next 5 minutes. I'm going to give you a gift and a requirement at the same time. This will help understanding the contradictions we're going to talk about a little bit today. I'm going to give you a gift. It's also a requirement. To attend this talk, to stay here, I need you to be fully present. Now, if you cannot do that, if you have something else you must attend to, that is not only okay, that's part of life. Go attend to it. We'll have a recording. You've signed up for this. You can come back and get it later. For now, if you cannot be fully present, go ahead and go take care of the thing that you need to take care of. Otherwise, put away your screen, put away your phone, no multitasking. You can eat, you can absolutely keep eating or having lunch where you are, but want to take your attention away from everything else. I will give you a focus question, and then we're just going to spend 5 minutes. And this will be a little bit of an experiment for a webinar, but we're going to spend 5 minutes. We're just going to be quiet. I want you to be present with yourself. If you need something for your brain to work on, the question I will give you is, what does the future of technology look like? We'll be talking about that here. You can ruminate in on it a little bit now, but it's totally okay to just let your mind wander as well. Keep the audio in so you can hear me, and I will start talking before I change slides. With that, go ahead and just close your eyes, put screens away, enjoy your food, and take a few minutes to reflect. All right. You can come back to your presentation screen. Still keep the other distractions to the side. Continue enjoying lunch. And let's get into the talk. So I'll begin switching slides around now. And I hope that that was a good reminder that we get to be in control of our minutes and how we spend them. And thank you for spending a few minutes with me today. So here's what we're going to talk about. Here's what I'm going to share. I'm going to share some different stories through some of my time in technology, and hopefully illustrate a few points for you if you want your work, your company, yourself, if you want to be successful with technology, if you want to lead the way into the future. I think these are some key things to understand. I am fascinated by apparent contradictions, so you'll see some of those throughout here, and I'll share a good number of stories from both tech and product perspective. We'll also get a little bit into the nuts and bolts of how technology works there before we wrap up by the day. So we're going to talk about a couple key points. Slow is fast, the importance of showing your work, what it means to take smaller bites, ship it, and seeking understanding. One thing that has changed drastically with technology is how much it takes people out of the loop. But the other thing is that has changed is how much it puts people back in the loop. And some things really never change. So remember, throughout this, we're doing this for people. We're doing this to help people. Technology, that's really ultimately what it's there to serve. And losing track of this usually ends up meaning losing track of your way on your project as well. So slowing down to speed up. Slow is fast. Seems kind of at conflict with move fast and break things. We'll come back to that a little bit later. But really slow is, I heard someone put it well, slow is steady, steady is fast. Good example of this is at the start of a project. A lot of times, hey, we only have a month to accomplish this. We need to build this whole thing out. We don't have time to do it right. But projects that skip on setting up pipelines, setting up testing, setting up common understanding, ensuring that there are syncs, that the person who owns the product for the business is present. All of these things are ways to try and go fast. And they all end up meaning that your project will deliver more and more slowly and even grind to a halt. So slowing down to go fast does not mean that you need to proceed at a snail's pace, but it means taking the time that is necessary to set up the right steps in the first place. You'll see this come into play with complexity. The more complex your product gets, the more people it's trying to serve, the more clever that you try and be, the more that can hurt you. But the thing that really hurts the most is when people have different incentives. So I was working for a major media company. We were working on their app, and as various news or medias want to do, that business is funded in large part by ads. So I had come on to help them make a transition from an older technology to a new technology. And they had embedded an ad framework. I don't know if anybody's worked with like embedding or using ad frameworks in your tools. This particular app was an iOS app. And the way that your mobile apps work is that they have this abstract concept called a window, and everything else gets put inside the window to get drawn onto the screen. It's like a window into the screen. Cool, great. That's what you use. For the most part, people don't even know it's there. Most developers never even realize they are inside of a window. It's just kind of built in. The stack has it taken care of. Ad frameworks have a particular concern in that they are paying for views and they don't want to be cheated. When we talked about humans matter, this is going to come in over and over in the story. So much of our problems come out of the problems we cause for each other, we cause for ourselves. In this case, because people will cheat, especially if it's easy to do. And so ad networks have to combat that cheating. That one of the ways that people will cheat is they will tell the ad network they've shown the ad, but not show it to the user, and just collect that money. So ad tooling gets increasingly clever and complex because they have the competing incentive to try and make sure they're getting those views. So this ad network in particular was doing something really interesting to go and make sure that it was viewed. Now, the reason this is all relevant is we had a bug in the app, and I was tasked with fixing it, finding and fixing this bug. Nobody had been able to find it. And I spent 2 weeks combing through code, stack traces, looking at calls, 2 weeks, every day, just hour after hour, trying to figure out what happens to this code and why parts of the app were losing touches, were stopping responding. Which, by the way, a little tip for those of you who are on the product or engineering side of things. If you are in the situation where you're chasing a bug and it's been more than 5 minutes, yes, only 5 minutes, open a text document somewhere and start taking notes and document. You can copy in all the commands you use in the command line, or if you've got your command line logs, you can use those. But still copy in like key actions you take, things that you try. Guarantee it won't be more than 2 or 3 hours before you discover that, oh, you turned something off, forgot to turn it back on. The last hour of my test that I ran were invalid because I had something else disabled anyway. If you have your logs, you can actually just go repeat those steps really easily and really quickly. And you can think through what is and is not valid. If you don't, you're going to be carrying all that mental state in your head. By day 2, you're forgetting things and losing things for sure. By day 5, you have no idea which way is up, whether you're still on planet Earth or anything else. So start logging them. You're not going to want to do it. You'll stop doing it. You'll regret it. Start the logging again. Every time you're on a bug hunt, more than 5 minutes, start logging it. So I learned this lesson partly on this particular bug because every time I stopped logging, I regretted it within hours. Within about 2 weeks, I finally started narrowing in that it was related to the ad framework. And it turns out what was happening is the ad framework was taking the entire app, all of it, just everything you could see on screen, and it was just detaching it from the window entirely. They just wanted to make sure they weren't cheated, so they just removed all views from the window because of the structure of super views and sub views. Everything else supposedly didn't notice. Except this code. This code also had a number of other problems, and some of the code was calling up to that window, assuming there was a window there to do some things. It was a way around not having good dependency injection. So it was multiple sets of different decisions and competing incentives at play. And so when the ad network unhooked it, if a call went through, there was no window, things would crash, they would just kind of fall out of play. Then the ad would finish playing, take the whole stack of views, swap it back into place, only things had broken behind the scenes. And of course, they didn't advertise they were doing that. Nobody knew, it wasn't documented anywhere. And I was having to look at disassembly code to figure out that's what's happening. So competing incentives can be pretty dangerous. Blame is useless. I think any of you on the call have talked with me before have probably heard this. Somebody once told me you can't change the past. And I thought that really stuck with me for why blame is such a useless activity. There is still validity in trying to understand the past. The big benefit there is so we can change what we're doing going forward. So we can change how we do in the future. Learning something very valuable, but blame, not so much. So as part of slowing down, one of the practices you should be doing is regularly doing some type of retro, some type of reflection back to what happened. In the airline industry, whether in the Air Force or even in commercial air, they actually do 2 different retrospectives anytime there's an accident. The airline industry is a place where there's just very little room for mistakes. If something goes wrong, the time between something going wrong and an entire plane falling out of the sky is very short. So there's and the cost, and in particular, the number of lives, is very high. So the airline industry cannot really tolerate those failures. So what do? They do 2 retros. One, they do a company retro where they gather info so that they can act on it, do what they need. But they have another separate retro that is a blameless retro. During that one, none of the information gathered in that can be used against anyone in their career or anything else, because they don't want to just find out why it happened, which is another fallacy. Oh, one person's at fault, one mistake was made. anytime something goes wrong, very often there was a chain of mistakes, as we saw in my last story too, leading up to that. There might be procedural weaknesses, there might be user errors, there might be mislabeled instruments, there might be malfunctions. And typically, if you go read some stories of aircraft or like other accidents that have extensive investigation into them, typically there's a whole chain of contributing pieces that lead to the ultimate failure. Typically more than one thing has to go wrong, quite often a lot of them. In a blameless retro, everyone is seeking understanding of all contributing factors so that then people can change the factors they have access to. You can't fix it so this never happens again. What you can do is change the contributing factors to try and make sure they never contribute again. So blameless retros, to the extent possible that you can implement blameless retros on your team, I definitely recommend that. All right, we're going to talk a little bit about food. And so hopefully you have something to eat if you are hungry and if it's lunchtime where you are. This is another example of slow leading to fast. And this is a key attribute, often attributed to technology companies. The company I was just talking about with media, typically considered a very technical company. The company I'm going to talk about now in the food industry, fast food, they make stuff for people to eat. You might think that's their primary business. Alternately, could certainly argue their primary business is logistics. Regardless, some food companies have really embraced technology as a tool to help them meet their primary objective and take care of people well. So for those of you who have been in the Southeast, there's a major chain called Chick-fil-A. If you've never been there, they have chicken. It's kind of in the name. But they also have a very different approach to service and customer service than most of fast food does. And in fact, in their drive-through lines, they will go out of their way to try and speed that up for customers, but also to make it clear. So if you've ever been in drive-through and heard the the little radio blaring out at you, trying to understand and communicate with the person, can be a frustrating experience, and it often is. So many Chick-fil-A locations started just putting their people out there directly instead. They ended up having to build infrastructure to have stuff over their heads. In particular, they also started equipping them with some technology, with some iPads they could carry around. Behind the scenes, ton of complication goes into how that gets done and pulled off. What makes this really interesting is COVID hitting. A lot of restaurants did not make it through COVID. It's a very tough time with people just not going out anymore. And certainly dine-in restaurants were all closed. Here you have very, very human elements, and you have the possibility of technology. If you can spin it up, if you could speed people going through. And so Chick-fil-A needed to pivot very quickly and start adding, like a lot of restaurants did at that time, start adding delivery, start trying to improve their throughput in their drive-through, which is where a lot of people go anyway, but now it was only that and delivery. Typically not a tech company, but they had put the right pieces in place to understand technology, to build up the fundamentals of strong technology. And what that allowed them to do was pivot very quickly to build out these capabilities. Now, behind the scenes, there was, undoubtedly some heroics. There's certainly like networking issues from in-store to out-of-store. But an interesting piece to their approach was to go slow and steady, tackle the issues, measure which one's the biggest one, find a fix for that, and keep going and allow the time to fix it properly. One of the things that's interesting is inside the company, they very much are a people-oriented place as well. And so they try to balance the work with a long-term perspective on having their people on. And that means they can build up more expertise over time. And that meant, again, when this hit, they were ready to pivot in a way that other companies were not able to pull off. They also avoided another common mistake. And this one I'm curious about for those of you who've been in product, who has come into, code base, a product, whatever, and it's just a complete mess. Maybe it's version 1, maybe it's version 20, but either way, it's a disaster. It's barely readable, barely usable, and have either been the one to suggest or have been part of a team that does a rewrite it from scratch. Let's redo this. It's too bad. We need to start over. And I'm curious to look at chat and see quick hand raises on who's done a rewrite it from scratch. I have done several of them myself. Popping over to look, and I see Davin's quote from a little bit of ago. Forgiveness means giving up all hope for a better past. Wow, that's really good. Yeah, Paul, that's contributing factors controlling the future. Absolutely. Recently was listening to a book, Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, and it mentioned that the present is where we touch eternity. But yeah, both the future and the past are outside of our reach. I see at least some of you have done rewrite from scratch. If you have not, if you come onto a product and you think the way to fix it is to throw it away and start over, I have some good news for you and some bad news for you. The good news is you're in really good company. That is a common conclusion when you come into a very messy code base. The bad news is you're almost certainly wrong. It might still be what everybody decides to do anyway. Very, very often, a rewrite is not going to solve the root issues that are causing the problem, causing the pain that's really making the rewrite attractive. You can do rewrites. In fact, you can replace things. The generally best approach to do that is slow. It's where you start by stabilizing a small piece, wrapping tests and controls around that, and then building out from there, establishing a screen or a flow for the user, establishing some part of the product small that is under better control and building out from there. It has to do with gaining understanding. It also has to do with why it's a mess in the first place. That tangle of code, those tangle of screens, they were created out of different concerns. Some of them are in the past. Some of them were different decision makers or different priorities that shifted around or misunderstandings of things that never got resolved. But you'll be a little surprised when you go to do this, how much of that mess is actually inherent to the problem you're trying to solve. And that inherent complexity, you just can't get rid of that. You can shuffle it around, you can move it around, you can rediscover it. And so rewriting rarely resolves the root problem, but it often rewriting means you rediscover the problems that are there. You run back into them again. So if you are a decision maker and you're tempted by rewrite from scratch, hey, let's replace this all, it's not going to be as fast or as cheap as you think. If your advisor, whoever's recommending for you to do the rewrite, if they're not talking through the downsides and the risks associated with it, if they're not reluctant to recommend it, you should be reluctant to accept it. So what do you do instead of rewriting then? Because all I've done is tell you not to solve your problem. You've got this gnarly code base. You've still got this messy product that you've got to deal with. What do? Read. Reading is actually the answer here. You will need to allow the team time to read, and not just read, but understand the code. Now, for those of you who are on the reading side of this, this is not a passive reading. This is an active reading. This is trying to wrap in test cases, trying to do small refactors. There's a good book, Working Effectively with Legacy Code. That is a good tool. You can actually just go through the chapters and say, oh, yep, that describes my problem. It's kind of like a recipe book for code that's just a mess. For product people, unfortunately, I don't know if there's a good tool out there like this. But it's your job to read the code and understand it. Comprehension of what's happening in the code is like 80% of our job. It is uncomfortable to spend that time reading. We expect we're supposed to be writing, creating something instead, but that understanding is going to allow much more nuanced and better fixes and designs. So make it active. Good news, even if you're not inside of a distributed version control system like Git, you can still use Git on your local machine with your code. You can put it in there so you can make small commits. You can change things and check things out and try different things. And then you can always like throw away or bring back different commits. So it gives you a history of your reading exploration, which allows you even that much more freedom to really actively kind of interrogate the code and seek to understand it. Speaking of which, with Git, you need to learn to use it well. If you're not investing time in this yourself, if you're not investing time with this for your team, this is a big opportunity. Leveling up in Git or Mercury or your preferred distributed version control system. These are some really powerful tools for those of you, again, that work in code all day. Corollary for this is spend time learning your tools. What we do these days is very much tool-assisted development. And that's not going to stop. It's only going to get more and more extreme. We're going to get more and more APIs and libraries and tool sets and entire frameworks that we can pull in to do parts of complex jobs for us, which means managing a complex set of connections and tools is an inherent part of a product person's job. Working across designs, coupling up designs to code, trying to get those pieces to be closer together. That's just going to be happening more and more in the future. So learn your tools, spend time with them, regularly level up. It's a little painful because you have to stop yourself from doing it the way you know how to do it and make yourself go do the new way that you're trying to learn. That can feel like slowing yourself down, but again, slow to go fast. Those who I've seen really, really accelerate their careers over the years are not trying to accelerate on a daily basis with a small mind. They're trying to accelerate over the long haul by forcing themselves to level up in their tool usage. All right, it's also important to show your work. We talked about slowing down. Showing your work means showing your work frequently. This is something that, again, is a hesitation. People are dealing with new technology. We've got, hey, we started that project. What do we have to show? There's not that much. Show what you have. You need to show what you have within a week or so. So story here about customer motivations and understanding them. I was working with a share ride service a number of years ago, and they were trying to start up some new capabilities, had an app along with the whole sort of ride service, spinning up a platform. So you got to have customers, you got to have drivers, you got to have vehicles, you got to have all those pieces. And in terms of trying to keep up, there's obviously some pretty well-known competitors out generally in that space. So even though they were focused on a different market segment than, say, the Ubers or Lyfts of the world, those are still competitors because the customers just looking to get from one place to another. They have different ways to get there. If you're going to compete with them, you have to understand what that competition looks like. And one of the pieces that those customers are expecting is to have problems resolved quickly. So fast iteration is actually becoming more and more an expectation, at least really across different user segments. In order to compete, they had to make sure that they were building something that was shiny enough to attract attention, that was solving real customer problems, that was in small enough chunks that it could be rolled out regularly. And that meant dealing with the cost of like iterating that, changing that user experience and dealing with that change for customers. So guiding them to a new experience instead of an old one, for example, which means putting in A/B testing, there's a lot of pieces to getting all of those put together, but it's not just, hey, what's the balance sheet right way to do this? You have to understand that people are still humans. They're still motivated by things that are shiny, but they still need things to be familiar. And you have to put those two together when you are moving. And that's very, very, very hard to solve. And so you have to show your work to each other, to your leadership. You have to come in and see what's being built, and you have to see it on a regular basis when it's relatively small. In the future of technology, it's only going to get more complicated and interwoven. And the big blast of the past just does not keep up with the scope of a modern technology product or project. I'm going to check for questions real quick and then keep going. Yes. For anybody who's wondering about that pattern that I mentioned earlier, that is the fig strangler tree pattern. It's a little bit of a weird name, but if you look up Martin Fowler strangler tree, you will see that pattern. And Doug, elaborate on which thing? Oh, the old way. The old way. Spec out everything that you need because you already all know it all, and then go build it all. Any version of that is longer than, say, a month is the equivalent of saying that we have a plan, so we're good. We don't need to revisit the plan. But just in software terms or in product terms. I'll see if you put some more comments in there. Maybe come back to that in a bit. It's worth noting, one of the reasons that I use these stories is that specific beats general. When showing work or when looking at work somebody shows, it's more effective to be very specific. Hey, we are going to be this user going into this flow, and we're going to click here and we're going to solve this problem. Actually, I was on a call earlier today again where we were doing this as a team. And that's actually great to see. Whenever we are specific, we are able to communicate more clearly with each other, which is already a problem in technology. Technology deals in a number of abstractions stacked on top of each other. It's very easy for people to refer to different layers of the abstractions. Putting something on screen and saying, here's what we're talking about, gets everybody aligned much better. Also, people's brains are great at going from specific to general. They're terrible at going the other way around. So if you need to show your work, show something really specific. And it needs to be in small bites. I mentioned small bites. Specific matches up with that really well. It can feel weird to spend a week working and have 2 minutes to show in a demo. As a leader, it can be weird to say that's all you've got, but actually, it's usually exactly what you need. Ah, cool. I see what that does. On to the next piece. Having that regular cadence of very small things shown regularly is going to catch misalignments much more early. Being specific is going to catch those misalignments earlier. All of this is about being able to collaborate as a team. And that's really what I see as the underlying foundation of the future of technology. We used to talk about data, just talk about information, but now collaboration is really the key to power. It's not enough just to share it internally with stakeholders, show it to your leadership. You do need to ship it. You need to ship it to customers, and you need to do that more early than you are comfortable with. Several years back, I was helping a startup. We built this from scratch as another platform tool, two-sided tool. It was to help people who need repairs and people who do repairs get together. It was within a specific industry, person who knew it really well, problem they knew really well. And so we're building out this tool, we're understanding our customer, and we were iterating really rapidly. We pushed them to put it in the App Store well ahead of when they were thinking it was ready, and to start trying to get beta testers for it. One of the things we've done is I had designed a frictionless login experience where you just need your email, whatever email it is you use, you put it in, sends you a link, and boom, you're into the app. Turns out I was a little bit too early on that. Like about 10 years, I'm seeing this happen in a lot more products these days. But at the time, the App Store review could not understand the login flow, and we could not get the app approved. Thankfully, we had put up our second week beta that was essentially like a white screen with a basic list in it. We had put that into the App Store. And so we weren't publishing it for everybody to be able to get it, but we had run it through the app review process. And so we were able to run into that issue much earlier than the client would have asked for, much earlier than some of the team would have expected it, which gave us plenty of time to write the stories and change out the login experience to be something that we could get through the process. It really doesn't matter if I was right about the design, because it was blocking us from shipping. And what did matter is that we had that time to fix it. We had that time to go and address it. So ship it really, really has to get all the way to customers, because there are so many pieces to getting through to customers that you have to discover and find. Sometimes you're finding one by one. I didn't even know that person cared. I didn't even know this department existed, and they still need to weigh in on this. Or getting it in front of customers just as a lean MVP. That early understanding of, hey, nobody seems to want to use this thing that we're building. This is one of the really, really important and hard parts of building technology products. Is it is easy for us to solve a problem because we can, rather than because anybody needs us to solve it. Has anybody seen those Coca-Cola Freestyle machines, the ones where you have all the different options of all the different sodas? Super cool. If you're a soda drinker, or even if you're not, just like technology wise, like super cool that you can go to the screen, tap whatever different buttons and get, like, I don't know, however many thousands of combinations of soda come out of it. Little scary maybe, but also cool. I'm curious, has anybody used the Freestyle app that comes with those, or even knows of the app's existence before my mention just now? Pop in chat if you are aware of the Freestyle app for Coca-Cola. All right, I'm not recommending you go get it. I have to admit, I don't really see much purpose in the app. I don't know that very many people do either. Another reason to ship this thing early. This was a solution in want of a problem. COVID kind of changed that. When COVID happened, I was like, you know what? I would like to not touch that machine that other people are touching, for sure. But other than that outlier, don't need the app I don't need to get my phone out to get my drink. And I certainly don't really need to save my favorite soda combination. So I'm sure there are some people that do find it very valuable. However, the investment in that app, I imagine, once they put it out there and saw how much usage there was, affected the decision they made on how much to keep investing in that. And this is something we really need to see. If we put our technology out there and nobody's using it, doesn't mean we're building the wrong thing necessarily, but it does mean that we're missing something. We need to learn something still, because that, again, is the point of the technology, is to get it actually used. So by shipping it, we hold ourselves accountable and close to what problem are we solving, what value does this bring, and what is the right way to solve that problem. Is this technology the biggest hurdle, or is there something else in the way before this can be adopted? Which brings to kind of a higher principle of making sure your incentives are aligned, that everybody you're having to try and act is acting in the same purpose. People are generally trying to do their best to do the right thing, but what is that right thing? Well, if you give people numbers, the right thing is to make their numbers go the way that you want them, that they think you want them to go. And if you're getting short-term thinking from people, you probably have incentives that are encouraging them towards short-term thinking. If you're getting people pulling in different directions, your incentives are probably encouraging them to pull in different directions. We talked about taking feedback with the freestyle example. And then clear beats correct. This is a little bit of a different twist on the specific beats general, where again, if people have numbers and they know how to make those go, they'll try and make those numbers go, even if what you need them to do is something different than that. And even if they could guess that was the correct answer. So be very careful about what you are directing and what you're being clear about. All right, our last few minutes we will spend in study hall. My last point was seek understanding. And to do that, we're going to dive into technology just a little bit. So I want to talk about a couple problems real quick. One is the blank slate problem. This is a problem that is both new to technology and also far, far older than any modern technology or software. When you get a brand new app and you open it, that is the blank slate problem, especially if what you see is an actual blank screen. Many screens, many apps are made to take your input as a user. Hey, take some photos and like apply filters to them. And then you can have cool photos. Take a feed and follow some people that you like, and then you can have your feed full of things. A recipe app for your kitchen. Hey, this is really cool. You can have all your custom recipes in there. All of those have the same problem. When the user first gets it, the app provides zero value to them because their information isn't in it yet. So getting users into a new piece of technology, always a challenge. That said, a lot of this has been figured out very recently or gotten better and better at, hey, provide some sample images that they can have filters, apply filters to, and even walk them through that in a tutorial process. Have already some recipes that they can select, hit a couple of your favorite foods, and we'll give you like a starting population. You can change it to yours over time, but now you're not starting from scratch. Hey, this feed, here's a list of recommended people to follow. The reason that you see these patterns now in all these products is because the blank slate problem means users get there, see no value for themselves, and leave. And by the way, your users are not, they're not dumb. They're not refusing to understand what's going on. Your users are concerned about their priorities and their concerns. And if you haven't bothered to explain how you're going to help them or made sure that you are helping them, don't be surprised if they just leave. So blank slate problem is something that's often overlooked when you're designing a new technology, a new product. What's going to be that new user experience? And when funding it, it seems like, oh, well, we already have to handle filtering, so you're basically done, right? But in reality, building out that initial onboarding experience, new user experience is an entire separate chunk of work and often a fairly large one. So it's something worth planning. How are we going to keep shipping, showing our work, moving quickly, building out this tool, while also making sure we actually do something to address the blank slate problem. Of course, fixing blank slate can also get into issues of privacy and personalization, but we're going to leave those aside for today. And then algorithmic complexity, sometimes called big O notation. This is one of those places where technology can get really unintuitive, and it can be hard for decision makers to follow what's going on. It can also be hard for product people who don't have insight into that specific piece or don't have experience. It's really easy to write code that performs extremely poorly and explodes into an exponential number of calls. And the only reason we can even overwhelm a modern computer, I mean, the amount of calls per second that my CPU is able to make is ridiculous. We can still slow it down. Why is that? A lot of that has to do with algorithmic complexity not being intended, but just an explosion of calls happening. It's really easy to write that into your product as well. So this is study hall. If you're not familiar with big O notation, You don't need to understand it at the, I can get a college degree level. You do need to understand it at the practical. I could have a chance of spotting this in code, or at least asking about this in code, and some tools to inspect it in code level. And from a product standpoint as well, having an idea of what that looks like. Big one is things being really slow, but of course that can be many causes. Wrapping up again, don't forget the reason we do this is for people. This tech, it is a tool. In the future, tech is going to be more and more broadly applied, but it's still in service of, wielded by, helping people. It can be scaled in a ridiculous amount, but if you lose track of the people side, you'll eventually lose your way at the product side. With that, I will close up, reminding you, slow is fast, show your work, take smaller bites, make sure you ship it, and seek understanding.